If you are thinking of buying fencing supplies from Menards, Lowe's, or Home Depot, you should definitely watch this video to the end. It could save you a lot of money and it could help you get a fence that is much more durable and thick. If this is your first time on the Lifey Guy channel, please hit that subscribe button. I do lots of home improvement DIY videos. So about a year ago, I built this fence around my backyard at our house, and it cost me all in all, I think it was about $3,000. And that surprised me because, you look at stores, like I bought my fencing supplies at Menards, and I like Menards and they have good prices usually, but the fencing posts and things costed so much. Like the fence mesh, I brought the black vinyl mesh. It was, 50 foot long and 4 feet tall. And that only costed me I can't remember if it was, $100 or maybe it was a little bit less than that. And so I'm like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. I've already got, 150 feet of fencing mesh. Like, how much more can it cost for posts and rails? And boy, was I wrong. So where fencing companies get you is in the top rails and the line posts and the hardware. It costs so much more than you would think it would. I mean, I thought, okay, if the fence mesh costs, $300, then the top rails and posts are probably going to cost about the same. But I was so wrong. Like, I spent, maybe $250, $300 on the fence mesh, but then I spent nearly $3,000 on all of the accompanying hardware. This year, I installed a new fence, a very simple fence. There's 2 terminal posts, 10 line posts, each spaced about 9 feet apart, and about 100 feet of fencing, and then all the accompanying hardware. And I got thicker. Here's the kicker. I got the fence posts and top rail were all thicker and heavier duty, and I got them for cheaper by looking outside of Menards, outside of Lowe's, outside of Home Depot. And so I'm going to share with you how I did it, and then hopefully you can do something likewise and save yourself a lot of money and ultimately end up with a cheaper and higher quality, more durable fence. So a couple weeks ago, I was thinking about building this 100-foot of fencing to fence off this one area of our property. And I thought to myself, I went to Menards last time and it cost me almost $3,000. And those posts are just so flimsy. I feel like if I were to jump my fence in the middle in between the line posts, me weighing about 170 pounds, I feel like I could literally deform and damage my top rails and my line posts. Like, my fence is just not that strong. It looks great, it has a nice paint job, but it is not that sturdy. The fence works, it holds up the mesh, but it's not meant for climbing or jumping, and it could get damaged and dented very easily. So the fencing supplies I bought for my first fence about a year ago cost me a total of about $3,000. And this fence that I just built, about 100 foot of fencing, costed me only about $500 to $600 total. Plus, the fence is a lot more durable. The gauge of steel they used is thicker than the kind you find at the big box stores. So what did I do? So a few weeks ago, I started calling around to these metal and steel manufacturing plants and being like, hey, do you guys sell any fencing supplies, like any pipes or any top rails or line posts, things like that? And they're like, no, I don't. Sorry, sir. So I called 3 of them. And on the third one, I called them and asked them, and they're like, no, we don't. But there's actually a guy who does. He has a farm supply company, Dutchman Farm Supply. Shout out to Dutchman Farm Supply. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'll check them out. So I called him and I asked him, like, what are your prices? And he was telling me like line posts and how they're thicker and how they only cost like $5 a pop for these line posts. I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking I paid like $20 a pop to get the black coated line posts at Menards. And the top rails were really cheap and the terminal posts. And he's like, you can get a package deal. And, you just tell me how much, corners you have and the length, and I'll tell you how much it will cost. And it only came out to be about $500. And the cool thing about the farm supply company was that they didn't just have thicker, standard line posts and top rails. They were all thicker and heavier than the Menards ones typically are, and cheaper. But not only that, they sold some like seriously heavy duty pipe. We're talking like Schedule 20 pipe, Schedule 40 pipe. Like, you could get ridiculously thick pipe. So if you want to have a ridiculously strong kind of fence and you want to save money, I would recommend looking outside of the big box stores I would recommend calling around to different steel manufacturing plants nearby and asking if they know anyone who is a supplier of chain link fencing. And if you can find a farm supply company, that would be a great place to start looking. I wish I knew this was an option back a year ago when I spent nearly $3,000 to build a fence that looks nice. Sure, it looks great, but it's kind of flimsy. The posts are just, I feel like I could bend them with my hands if I had to. And I just, it's so liberating knowing that I can construct and build a fence, 100 feet of fencing for under $600 that is a lot sturdier than the more expensive fencing that I used to get. Another cool thing about going with the farm supply company that I went with was that I could order thicker gauge chain link for dirt cheap. Like, we could get twice as heavy of steel for only about $1 more per foot. So if I wanted to have the 100 feet of fencing be 9 gauge instead of 11 gauge wire, and 9 gauge is like, practically indestructible. It's like commercial grade, right? That would only cost me about $100 extra. Now, if I go to Menards, you can see to get 6-foot 9 gauge wire, just 50 feet of that costs about $300 just for the mesh. There's just a lot of reasons why it would be well worth just taking, a half hour and making a few phone calls to any steel manufacturers, producers, suppliers that are near you and asking for referrals. If you do that enough times, you'll probably find someone who could maybe supply you with posts for a lot cheaper that are a lot thicker than what you'd find at a big box store like Menards, Lowe's, or Home Depot. And if you want to save even more money, you might consider going to the farm supply company or whatever company sells fencing and ask them if they'll tell you who their supplier is. Then you can contact the supplier and maybe buy fencing in a large quantity for the same price as they supply it to the company you'd be buying from. Anyways, I hope this video has been helpful for you. If it has, please give it a thumbs up and a subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.